This episode feels like this volume is finally coming together a little bit. There's finally a direction that I can pin down for what the volume is trying to say, at least on a character level. The main idea of this episode is RWBY is right. That's what I get from my perspective, and I'm gonna try to explain it fully in this video. Now, to be clear, RWBY is stupid. I'm not going to pretend like every dumb thing she's done in the past doesn't exist, because she did not know what her semblance does, her ability as a human being. She is a terrible leader that tried to coax an alcoholic out of his alcoholic stupor by telling him that he's inferior to kids. And she lied to Ironwood about the lamp, which is a questionably good decision, I guess, but based on what she's actually trying to do, like her MO and her philosophy, it's a bad idea, because she's starting communications with Ironwood with deception. Now on to why I think that the story's trying to say she's like objectively right. Virtually every problem present in this chapter comes as a result of people not listening to RWBY. Now, as is made very clear, RWBY's intention is to have everybody work together in a cohesive way and be focused on the same goal. That goal being to set up 5G for all of Remnant because her mom stopped answering her phone calls one day. The goal of that was to establish worldwide communications. And communicating is the only way to build trust, which is the only way to build unity. So RWBY's just trying to make one big group that is everybody who will go against Salem. So far, this is all pretty basic. But what's happening in this volume is as the episodes go forward, or as the story goes forward, all the groups that have been built up to this point are slowly being broken down. The Beacon hunts people, Ironwood and the Aesops, and Salem and Cinder. Also Salem and Ozma, but that's more of a divorce court situation. No semblance will grant either of them custody. Now, what happens as a result of these teams splitting? I can't say anything yet when it comes to Salem and Cinder because nothing happened with that plotline yet. Like, we have to see what Salem does in response to Cinder leaving and what Cinder does when she gets to Amity. But as for the protagonist group split between the Mantle Protectors and the Amity Setter-Uppers, the group split and the way that split occurred made it so that Oscar got kidnapped. Reason number one why that occurred: the Hound was smart enough to wait for them to get separated. That's why in the previous episode you can see him, synchronizing with the area like in Assassin's Creed. To make that situation even worse, Oscar, Jean, Ren, and Yang are the worst possible team to deal with a flying enemy, and they mentioned this a couple of times in the actual show. They mentioned that they wish they could fight back better against a flying enemy. Oscar has no semblance. Jean's semblance only works to amplify other people's semblances, but everyone else's semblances wouldn't help with this situation. I mean, the best Ren's semblance could do is hide Oscar while he's in the Hound's hand. And then I guess the Hound would say, "Damn, what did I pick up this nothing for? Let me put down this 110-pound absence of matter. I need to get my lag of eyes checked." And John's aura would just amplify his ability to do nothing in this situation. Penny, RWBY, and Weiss would have been way better team choices for this situation. And the show is clear to point out that their abilities are not matched for this situation at all. Jean, Ren, and Yang, that is. So jumping ahead to episode 4 when we revisit this plotline. After the Oscar retrieval squad gets clapped by the sentient dog and his team of decomposing Alaskan bullworms, they roam the tundra and call for help. And either Jean didn't get any signal or he got the wrong number. The writers are implying here that the correct choice would have been for the whole team to be working on Amity, because if they had worked on Amity first, they wouldn't be having this problem of having no communications outside of Mantle. So at every point in the Oscar gets kidnapped subplot, there's no way for Jean, Ren, and Yang to win against the Hound because they're under-equipped in every possible way for that fight. Whereas if they had stuck around with RWBY and actually worked on Amity Coliseum, they would have the communications and the appropriate team to be able to deal with something like Oscar getting kidnapped. At least that's what the show seems to be saying based on how these events played out. Oscar made the point in episode 1 that they could all be together mentally without being together physically, but the show is implying with how it's playing out that Oscar's middle ground idea doesn't really work in practice, or at least it's not working in practice because everybody's getting clapped. So Ren's right when he says that everybody was not prepared to be huntsmen and they weren't prepared to be in the situation that they're in. Like, he's angry and he's not expressing it that well, and he's being kind of a neckbeard, but he is right. Team RWBY has always been saved by either plot armor powers or rogue edgelords in their quest to save the world. So this episode mainly has to do with blame. That's like the central idea in it. And who's to blame for what outcome. But the establishment of blame and the way that blame is framed in this episode kind of shows the broader point that's trying to be made by the writers here, and I hope that they explore it further later on. Specifically, what happens after you establish blame. Like, a lot of this volume has to do with distrust and what happens when you don't trust your allies. And the difference between the protagonist and the antagonist that I think will end up making all of the difference is Team RWBY and the rest of the protagonists, yes, establish blame and all that, but in the long run, they will most likely come to some kind of resolution between themselves that will allow them to act in a more unified way. Whereas with Salem, her creation of the Hound represents her inability to trust other people and her core loneliness as a person. Because the whole point of this experiment was to develop, I mean, at least in my opinion, was to develop a thing that would just follow her orders blindly. And she didn't really need to trust because it would just do what she said. This episode showed that Cinder has agency and she wants to do things on her own and feels like she should be trusted by Salem. And Salem obviously doesn't trust her. So the Hound is like an escape for Salem almost, where she can't trust other people, so she'll just rely on some lapdog essentially. Whereas in reality, people have to learn how to trust each other if they're going to work together. To execute on the themes of the story, I think the outcome of the Hound will have to be important. Like, the whole idea of the Hound being just a blind follower of Salem will have to backfire on it somehow and cause it to lose or something to that effect in order for it to make sense that ultimately a lapdog isn't a good idea to have instead of trustworthy allies. Now, how does RWBY factor into all of this? Hopefully not at all. But one thing that's striking me about this volume is that I don't feel like she has a clear character direction. Like, they're implying that she's kind of dumb and that her leadership is questionable, but she's ultimately right at the end of the day. And this is what annoys me about RWBY's character arc, or just her character in general. She's just assumed to be like this pure good, and her childishness or foolishness is chalked up to like, she's fun and all that, when she's the leader of the team that will, save this planet. If the general of a real life army didn't know what his abilities were and also created discord in his ranks, no one would be like, that general is my fucking waifu. But anime can blind even the brightest of men. It just feels like most of the other characters have a clear direction besides her. Crow has, like, getting over the trauma of his close friend dying and working on trusting people and all that. And, Ren is like being more emotional and opening up to people. Jean is, I'm actually not sure. There's at least some vague clarity to other characters, whereas with RWBY, there just isn't. And the central ideas behind RWBY this volume don't feel like they connect together in terms of her actions well enough to constitute a character arc. The last thing I'll say is I like this idea of moving from blame to trust. Like, having distrust because of blame and then eventually trusting your allies and all that. Because that's kind of how we started the group split in the first place. Like, Yang was subtly blaming RWBY for things not going too well since they got to Mantle. And hopefully they focus in on RWBY's character a little more and try to work on her leadership and competence so that her leadership and competence can allow her to bring everybody together and essentially stop the other characters from blaming each other so that they can focus on the main goal in front of them, which is Salem. Anyways, that does it for the review of this chapter. This time I wanted to focus a little bit more on just having like a thematic analysis, because I feel like they're trying this time to actually have themes that connect to the plot, and this episode showed that attempt pretty well. Also, I'm not trying to do just every week I just react to, whoa, that was crazy, every time. Like, just real quick, that fight scene was cool, and Salem is still my type 3 volumes later. Yeah, I still ship Robin and Crow, fight me. What else? But I'm really not here to theory craft. The whole point of what I'm doing here is like having fun analyses of, these episodes, and, I guess trying to maximize our enjoyment of the story by trying to pull some themes out of it and seeing how well they're executed on. Like, it's a good lesson in writing. Anyways, thanks for watching. Like, comment what you would like to see in like another video. If, as the chapters go on, like what kind of analyses you'd want to see, or what you feel like other people aren't really talking about that you feel like I might be good at talking about based on the videos that I've been putting out. And stay warm. It's winter everywhere now in the northern hemisphere. You know what? You figure that out.